Out of all the coasters I've reviewed by now, one of the coasters that deserved the absolute most is Lynet at Fårup Sommerland here in Denmark. Lynet is currently my favorite roller coaster in Fårup Sommerland, and you might already know this damn park because this is where we're getting Phoenix next year, and if this doesn't beat Lynet, I'm gonna be really disappointed. But right now, Lynet is one of my favorite coasters in Denmark. It is a Gerstlauer Launch Coaster, the first of 2 ever made. The reason only 2 were ever made is because this is basically the predecessor to the Infinity Coaster, as well as just the launched Eurofighter, and as soon as they did those things, they just thought, well, guess we don't need these anymore. It features special 6-seater cars, just like Anubis the Ride at Plopsaland, which is the other Gerstlauer Launch Coaster, and then also Huracan at Belantis, which is a Eurofighter. My last ride on it was last year in August of 2020, but I still remember it pretty decently, and I thought I ought to give it a review because then I've pretty much covered most of the big coasters in the country. It opened back in 2008, and it was actually Denmark's first launch coaster. It utilizes an LSM launch and goes from 0 to 80 kilometers an hour in 2 seconds. It is a rolling launch though, so it's maybe not exactly 2 seconds, but nonetheless this is a pretty powerful launch. It stands 65.6 feet tall and is 1,771.6 feet long. It goes 49.7 miles an hour at its top speed after that sick-ass launch and features 2 solid inversions. As I said, it has 6 rider cars over 3 rows, and it has a duration of 40 seconds including 2 mid-courses. However, those mid-courses are certainly not a bad part of the ride, which I will get into very soon. Now let's start off this goddamn review. Lynet is a very cool looking ride. I've always thought that Lynet looks pretty solid, especially the colors are very wood-like, and I mean the park itself is kind of themed to the forest, and Lynet itself is as well. It's at least supposed to be out in the forest and in some sort of sawmill. I mean, the cars themselves are locked, so I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a sawmill, which is kind of weird considering that Lynet means lightning, and there are lightning effects in the queue line and everything. So I'm guessing that the theme is basically that you're at a sawmill and there's a storm. And again, in regards to appearance, it looks pretty solid. It's definitely not an ugly coaster. It's definitely not the prettiest coaster ever, but I really like looking at this thing. Your ride experience begins with a classic Gerstlauer drop into the LSM launch before it kicks you off, and this is a sick launch. I love rolling Gerstlauer LSM launches like this. They're just so good because the launch itself is very fast. You hit the top speed quite quickly, and they're very snappy. Even though they're rolling, they're incredibly snappy, and you get a hard kick in your back, and then you just stay in the back of your seat. It's very good. And I'll be honest, I'm a whore for launches, alright? So this is my favorite part of the ride. Next up, you go into this top hat turnaround. Very intimate styled, except it's a little more pointy. I guess that's Gerstlauer's take on it. This top hat isn't the most intense element in any way, but it offers some smooth laterals as well as some decent floater at the top. But this is just the beginning of the airtime on this ride, because after this top hat, you move into this great camelback. This is definitely one of the strongest airtime moments I've ever felt on a launch coaster. This camelback just has straight up hard ejector. It's fantastic, and even though you do have big, thick over-the-shoulder restraints, it's still great airtime. If you're a little shorter like me, the restraints will allow your shoulders to get a lot of space for that airtime. But nonetheless, even if you're completely stable, you're definitely still going to be feeling that force up into the restraint. This is a fantastic camelback. And it only continues when you go into the next element, which is the ascent into the first mid-course brake run. And the airtime here is even stronger than in the camelback, especially in the front row. I do prefer the camelback because it's longer and it goes downwards as well, which is another cool sensation of hills. That's a weird sentence. This is just a very fantastic airtime moment and really, really strong as well. One thing I'd like to also note is that between all of these 3 hills that we just went through, you also get some solid positive forces between them. However, they're not strong, they're just nice and smooth and slightly sustained. You might not necessarily notice them, but if you do, you're like, oh, okay, that's a nice surprise. And yeah, the entrance to this mid-course is one of the things that shows that the mid-courses are pretty kick-ass. After that mid-course, you hit this very twisted drop, which is also very fun and has some weaker but very smooth and fun whip at the top, before it then slaps you into this 0G roll, which is incredibly floaty. It's not a very whippy 0G roll, it's not super snappy, but it is nice and solid and floaty, and has some weak laterals from the side. This 0G roll is very similar to the one found on Demonen at Tivoli Gardens, and after that you go into this quick turn here, which also delivers some solid positive forces, Then you hit this overbank, which doesn't really do anything. It's a little floaty, I guess, but it doesn't really provide any hang time or whatnot. Then into the curved drop, which does deliver a little bit of positive forces. And then into the corkscrew, which is actually my favorite inversion in Denmark. I think this corkscrew is just great. They're very similar to some of the corkscrews on Monster at Grönlund. It's not quite as good, but it is still very, very nice. It's very floaty, but also has some weaker but very fun and smooth whip. Overall, this is just a very fun inversion. Then you get a quick pop of positive forces and then another strong airtime moment into the second mid-course. It's not as strong as the previous moments, but it's still a solid, very quick ejector moment. After this mid-course, you get a quick burst of laterals to the left, also not very strong, but very solid. And then you go into this final helix here, which actually delivers some solid positive forces. You gain some pretty nice speed in this, and then you twist very gracefully up into the final brake run. That is the layout of Lynet, and I gotta say, I think this layout packs a punch. It's not the most intense layout, and a lot of the elements aren't necessarily strong or super whippy, more floaty and just very fun and graceful actually. But still, they're just super fun. I really like this layout. Now, one of the problems that several people have with this coaster is the fact that it's not necessarily smooth. But I think it varies very much in regards to how smooth people think it is. A lot of people say that this ride is way too rough and that it kind of takes away from the ride. It has a lot of headbanging and so on. I disagree. When I rode this last year, it was not like that at all. It certainly had some rattling throughout most of the ride, and it certainly was shaking you around, but with no headbanging. It was not uncomfortable at all. I did not care for it at all. It did not bother me one bit. In fact, I only noticed 2 moments of the ride where I would actually get some headbanging, and there would be one hit and then that was it. And it wasn't a hard hit either, so it wasn't painful. Basically, when you sit in the front, it is this turn right here, and if you sit in the back, it is this valley right here. So in other words, it's not a smooth ride, but it doesn't really matter, because it's not painful or like necessarily rough. My overall thoughts of this ride is that it's just very good. This is a very good predecessor to some of the later Infinity coasters like Carajo and Junker. Of course, it's much smaller, it's a little more classic and older in the layout, but man, it packs a punch. It's a great launch, it's fantastic airtime, it's really fun inversions. It's one of my favorite coasters in Denmark, and it is currently my favorite coaster in the park in Fårup Sommerland until next year. Because I'm literally drooling over this. That's gonna be my review of Lynet. Everyone let me know what the hell you think of this. Also, I really want to give Anubis a ride in Plopsaland because that thing looks fucking killer, dude. It looks so good. Have you ridden Lynet? Because again, let me know what you think of it. If you haven't, let me know what you think of it beforehand. Have you ridden Anubis or maybe Huracan with those other weird 6-seater cars? Besides that, I just want to thank you very much for watching. Go, I don't know, watch another video? I don't know. Bye!